Hello everybody, welcome to this fabulous interview we're doing here for LiveMusicStage here in the digitalmusic.org booth here at South by Southwest. I am here with the fabulous Jasper Donat, is that how you pronounce it?
Fabulous, yes. Fabulous is how you pronounce fabulous.
And I am Brian Zisk. We do the two best internet music technology shows in the world, so thrilled to have him here. He does, why don't you tell us about your shows? They're, I've never made one, but I hear they're just spectacular. And I really don't say that about other shows.
Thank you, Brian. We run a few shows around Asia. The main one is Digital and Music Matters. It's in Singapore in May. If you need to learn anything about the Asian music business, Japan, Australia, China, India, Indonesia, all the big markets down there, is kind of the place to be.
Awesome. So how is the Asian music market going? I mean, in the United States, there's a lot of issues, there's a lot of transition. Is it the same there, or because I think technology is actually a bit ahead in Asia? I mean, have you been hitting issues that we haven't hit yet? What's going on?
That's a very good question. I mean, to start with, there's no such thing as Asia. Asia is, 28, 30 different countries, different cultures, different political systems. And so to talk about Asia as one homogenous mass is very hard. But piracy has been the main issue in Asia for many, many years. And in some markets, you read the IFPI report, they'll say that in China, piracy is 100%. And so if you want to succeed in the music industry in China, then you've got to be pretty creative in your business model. So there's some really interesting things going on in Asia at the moment. China, Japan is very interesting. It's the world's second largest music market, largest mobile music market by a long way. Government rumored to be dropping a ton of money on music export, which means we'll see lots more Japanese bands touring, which is fantastic. And then of course there's the big K-pop phenomenon that's happened over the last 10 years, but really only surfaced in the last year, where for the first time Asian music is being exported around the world and picked up in a local language, so in Korean language.
So how much do you find that it really is these kind of silos where, if you're in Singapore, it's really about Singaporean music, and in Korea it's really about Korean music, and how much of it is like a crossover mix?
That's a good question. Again, it depends on the country you're in, but silo is a very good word because every country is incredibly different to everywhere else. So in China, Chinese pop music is the mass, with K-pop kind of rapidly coming up second. Used to be J-pop, and international music in China is very, very small. It's 5% of the market maybe, but 5% of 1.3 billion people is, I'm not going to do the math now, it's 65 million people. It's quite a big market, that's the size of the UK. But whereas if you go to India, it's much more about Hindi pop and Hindi film music, but the international content is a lot bigger. You go to Singapore, you get into a taxi from the airport, they're listening to English language music. So you've got a much more international market.
Do they listen to English language US produced music, or it's English language Asian produced music?
I'd say Western produced, mostly. The local language artists in Asian territories tend to record in their own languages.
Interesting.
The story's always, when was the last time you bought a Chinese language album?
Never.
So why would they buy an English language album in if you're in Tianjin? But there is a big market for international music in certain parts of Asia.
Interesting. So in the US, 15 years ago, you really had to be signed to a major, and you couldn't get in a store unless you were signed to a major. And now, with the net and all of these things, really there's the ability for folks to really, I don't want to say do it yourself because you still need a great team, but to do it a little bit outside of the traditional structure. Are you seeing it, vary by country in Asia? Is it still kind of the large companies that drive the way? Are there more and more indie folks able to do it on their own? And does that really vary by territory?
Another good question. in most markets, the indies are the majors.
Okay.
And the majors play a very important role, and you know, have been the 360-degree model almost started in Asia, and it's always been the norm rather than the exception. So when you're tied to or when you're signed to a major, then they do control everything.
Right.
But also in local markets, then you'll be working with the independent labels. They have the connections in the Guangxi with all the media companies and what have you. So it's predominantly an indie-driven market.
Interesting.
There are, you know, Universal EMI are massive now in Asia, but you know, Sony Music have done very well with fostering local talent, as have Warner now. So it's you know, a very interesting mix.
So in the U.S., we kind of have had this physical system, and then there's digital. And in the physical system, you'd kind of have, you know, the people who own the music. You know, it's created, it's owned, same or different people, whatever. Then there's a distributor, and then there's a retail store. And on the digital, you produce it, someone owns it, you go through a distributor, you go to all the different services. Is it the same sort of structure in Asia, or is it different? Does it vary by country, or how does that go?
Asia's been mobile for years.
Okay.
And has led the way in mobile entertainment for many, many years. I mean, as I said earlier on, Japan's easily the world's largest mobile entertainment market.
Right, sure.
But you know, when iPods came out with wires that led into a laptop or into a computer, you know, Chinese kids are like kind of going,
why? That's funny.
Because you know, whether it's legit or pirate, you can still press a button and down comes all your music, all the music you want.
Right.
So yeah, it's a largely mobile.
And how does that work in India? Because is it as advanced, the mobile usage there?
Yeah, they've had 3G now for a while. I mean, piracy in India has been very, very bad, because you could just go to a little local store and they'll sell you a micro SIM with
everything.
Microchip with everything on it. But it's getting better, and the streaming services are coming now, and the mobile operators in India are starting to build big subscriber-based networks and stuff. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
What does it cost in India? I mean, I'm assuming they can't charge $10-15 a month there.
The actual numbers I couldn't tell you, but it's very low. But they're working off a long tail strategy rather than, you know, trying to overcharge. They're charging something for as much as you can get. But they're on an upward trajectory. You know, sales are up with digital music. And you know, the sites are now creating a service which is in some way better than pirate, so that's only a good thing.
Interesting. So if you were a U.S. firm trying to get into the Asian market, outside of going to your show and meeting everybody, of course, what's the right strategy for that? Do you find a partner? Do you find the best partner for each territory? Do you work with whatever it is? I mean, everyone seems to work with that 88 or whatever in China. I mean, are there, do you kind of work with one group and they cover the region? Do you have to find the different folks for everywhere? What would be the best approach for someone who wanted to enter that market?
I think the first thing you have to do is choose your market. So are you going to go for a China or India or Indonesia or Korea, Japan? Because all of those markets are so very, very different. So work out which market you want first and go and base yourself there. Point one. Point two, find a local partner, and find the right local partner who not only you can trust, but who can manage your business for you or with you.
Sure.
And third, you have to be there.
Right.
You've got to get your hands dirty in that market. You can't manage an Asian operation from New York without actually physically being there. Similarly, I couldn't do an event in San Francisco, A, without really pissing you off, and B,
which no one wants to do.
Without being there, you know. I mean, you've got to be in the market to be able to do it. So, and the fourth thing we always say is when you are there, don't turn up and say, with your hands on your hips, this is what we did in the West.
Oh, of course.
Because A, all the notebooks are going to come out.
Write this guy off.
Well, they'll start taking a lot of notes and take all the good stuff. But B, they want to understand that in that part of the world, they want to understand what the business models are that do work, not just because it works in America. It's not going to work in Indonesia or China.
Right.
In fact, quite the opposite, probably.
So how do you find and evaluate who to trust? I mean, because it's a different culture. You're going there and it's people.
Wow. If I knew the answer to that, I wouldn't be here today. I'd be on my island drinking caipirinhas and toasting you on your island on the other side of on the water. I guess it's you know it takes time. It takes time. You gotta build trust. You gotta build friendships. You gotta build relationships. It's very hard to just kind of rock up and launch.
Mm-hmm. And so, okay, and on the other side, if you're talking about, American companies who are trying to work with Asian music producers to bring their music here, the J-pop or the K-pop, how do you decide who to work with, and how do you figure out what's actually going to fit in with the Western culture in a way that it will turn into a profitable business?
It's interesting because for 20 years, I've been in Asia for 20 years, and for 20 years, people were saying, when is Asia going to cross over? When will people finally start buying Asian music? And it's 2012 was the year. There are now people desperately trying to find K-pop bands to launch everywhere, and hopefully J-pop to follow, and then who can forget
S-pop
China?
and C-pop.
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be a Chinese artist is gonna break at some stage.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you find them? You got to come to Asia.
Interesting.
In Korea there are hundreds of talent academies right now.
Okay.
But there's really 3 or 4 main talent management companies who are really cutting it out there, and so yeah, it's kind of working with them.
Interesting. So now that we have like this kind of global network and people can distribute music internationally, and it's not so controlled by distribution channels and what's going to sell in each territory, do you think that music's going to become more homogenized because you can reach everybody around the world at the same time, or do you think it's going to enable more differentiation because somebody can say, you can take the Bhangra music and sell it to the expats all around the world? So do you think it will enable the specialization, or do you think it'll cause more homogenization?
2 years ago, I would have said it's really exciting, but it's very language driven. I'd have said, the Chinese diaspora in the States and in Europe will buy Chinese music, and the Korean diaspora will buy Korean music, and then K-pop changed all that.
Got it.
Because you've got kids in the Staples Center in New York going to see K-pop concerts where they're singing in Korean,
right?
And these kids, the American kids, are singing in Korean. They don't necessarily understand the words, but they're singing in Korean. It's like Beatlemania in the 60s in Germany.
Sure.
They went over and sang in English, and the Germans didn't necessarily understand it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very interesting sensation because everyone's if Western music's been spreading English language around the world for 100 years,
right?
Are people now going to start listening to Chinese music, Mandarin music, Cantonese music, Japanese music, Hindi music, and start singing along?
Right.
And it's interesting, you mentioned 88, TC88. There are a number of translation firms coming up, or translation apps coming up at the moment that are taking the song and translating them into local language.
Interesting.
And that's got to be a good thing.
Because that was my next question.
Are
we seeing that where it's like basically the same song, but they kind of localize it for all the different markets?
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 schools. I mean, I think it's a good thing. If it's making more Asia content available to more people, then that can only be a good thing. There are other people, the purists out there. I mean, Troy Carter, Lady Gaga's manager, was at Music Matters last year. He was asked about that, and he said no. He said if she writes a song in English, then that's how the song should be presented, and we're not going to translate it.
Interesting.
But some other managers, Terry McBride, when he was looking after Avril Lavigne, 10, maybe 12 years ago, got her to record a track in Mandarin, in Portuguese, and in Hindi. And at the time, that was mind-blowing, and it was...
Did it break? I mean,
absolutely.
So she was popular in China?
She sells out in China. She sells everywhere she goes in China now. She sells out, and a lot of that is because she connected with her fans in their own language.
Awesome.
It was at the time, it was a genius idea. Right now, you think, well, that's kind of easy, and also there are all these companies now that will translate, live for you. So I think it's Lyric Find and 88 TC88, people like that.
Interesting. So what are the hottest up and coming? I mean, do you still? I assume there are, in America we've got so many startups who are all like, how do we connect the artist with the fan? How do we da 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 da? What are you seeing coming out of Asia that really may be changing things on a small company but big impact level?
I think what's really exciting and interesting at the same time is that a number of the big Chinese networks are now starting to spread kind of over this way. They're coming to the States, they're coming to Europe, and a prime example of that is WeChat.
Okay.
You know, it's a Chinese service, English name, and
Right.
everyone's starting to use it.
Sure.
I was in South Africa in last month, Chinese New Year, and I was in a Vodacom shop getting a local SIM card, and there's an English guy in front of me who bought a local SIM card, and he was saying, "Can I get WeChat? Can I get WeChat on this SIM card?" And so he's an English guy in South Africa,
Right.
asking about a Chinese-based chat service. So
Got it.
you know, you look at the social networks that are available in China, Indonesia, where you've got hundreds of millions of people all hanging out, hundreds of millions, and artists who are connecting to tens of millions, sometimes hundreds of millions of artists,
Right.
of their fans. That's really exciting, because that's going to start coming
Sure.
this way.
Sure.
Now, whether it's right or wrong, and I'll probably get shot on my way home for saying this, the Facebooks and Twitters and YouTubes and Googles aren't in China.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And whether that's going to change or not, who knows?
Okay.
So they're coming this way.
So a huge trend here, and I know we're almost out of time, is kind of like live streaming of shows, whether you're connecting the artist and the fan directly or setting up at the venue or whatever. It's a huge trend here in the US and Scandinavia, all over the place. Is that equally big in Asia, or is it gonna, or what are your thoughts on that?
As a massive plug for Music Matters, we were the first Asian music festival to broadcast live on YouTube. It's a new thing.
Okay.
It's just starting. The last 12 to 18 months, people have started to broadcast live. There are some licensing issues, because you're not talking about one market.
Sure.
To broadcast across multiple territories, if there's publishing involved, it can get quite complex.
And there's always publishing involved.
Yeah, and so, it really is starting to happen more. I mean, YouTube are by far and away the dominant platform outside of China, in all of Southeast Asia and India, but in China they're streaming as well, and you can't really stop it. So yeah, I mean, it's very, very exciting. Very exciting times. The live music industry in Asia is really on a major upswing. And again, look at China, where 10 years ago it was very hard to produce any kind of live content without a license, because the government were very nervous about.
What someone might say.
Well, what people might say, Bjork gets up on stage in Shanghai and says free to bet, and the government bans all live music for 6 months. I mean, who's she doing a favour for? It hurts the industry when you do that. But now the government are much more open to live music, and there's more and more festivals opening up all over the place. So that's going to only open up more opportunities for tech companies to do more things like a Mosh Cam or any of the live streaming services.
Awesome. So any parting thoughts? I think we've got to wrap this up in about a minute, I think was our, anything you want to tell the massive worldwide audience?
I think Asia's hot, and it's not just coming to Asia to understand what Asia's all about. Mm-hmm. It's about coming to Asia to find out what can be exported, what can be taken out of Asia and imported into America and Europe, because the technology's there. They've got the networks that are, China Mobile's got, 500 million subscribers. I don't know what the number is. It's north of 500 million subscribers.
Right.
What kind of knowledge can we learn from Asia that can be taken into what are more modern markets and Western markets for the greater good of music and artists and tech companies?
And the best way for someone to learn about all this stuff in Asia, possibly coming up towards the end of May, is?
Possibly coming up to 21st to 25th of May in Singapore. Digital and Music Matters. Allthatmatters.asia is the URL. and just come pick your market and make lots of money.
And then get on the Nerdbird from there and fly to San Francisco for the SF Music Tech Summit the next week. And thank you so much, LiveMusicStage, and all of you out there, and Jasper. And if you're here at South by, I hope to see you. And thank you all so very much.